Thank you, ma'am. Very good afternoon to all of you. And thanks to Negi Saab and our organizers here for organizing such a beautiful event. This is, I think, the 11th edition of the CGD event that is being held every year by Negi Saab. And every year we have some theme which goes across the entire event. This time it is on gas sourcing and how CGDs can benefit out of sourcing initiatives that are that they can undertake. So I think before we start the session, we've got some very eminent speakers here who will talk about their experience in the CGD sector, what they are doing and how they are, their efforts are allowing the proliferation of the infrastructure and the development of the CGD business. Of course, we have an international speaker here also who will tell us his experience there. Before that, I thought I will just maybe take it forward from the last session to give you some insight of, a study which PNGRB had got conducted last year. And what was the, outcome of that study? I think I'll share that with you to give you an insight as to how important this sector is for the gas industry per se. And what the other speakers in the first session had talked about, that this is probably going to be the most important sector as far as the use of gas is concerned. So, some couple of slides. Can we have the slides, please? Oh, pointer, what है? Forward करने के लिए ये So this was a study which was got done by PNGRB last year, and the numbers are slightly old, but the theme and the projections are fairly accurate. So they got the study done to figure out as to how will we reach that 15% number, 15% of the energy basket for natural gas. And in this, they found that last year the entire sales were 160, 170. Now it is close to 200. वही फर्क पड़ा है. Out of 160, if we grow at the same pace, the entire gas sector grows at the usual pace, which was around 7-8% compounded annually. We will reach a level of about 300 million cubic meters, which the earlier speakers also had talked about. Now, in that, from 200 to 300, look at the share of the CGD, which I have circled around. About 80 million cubic meters of gas is likely to be utilized in this sector going forward in the next 4 or 5 years. So these are numbers up to 2030 only. The kind of importance that the CGD sector has can be seen from this very chart. Now, if we have to really reach at the 15% kind of a energy mix by 2030 or 35 for that matter, then the additional effort again will come from the CGD sector. Again, another 60 million cubic meters will go into this sector, the use by this sector, for us to have a share of about 15%. So about 140 million or 150 million additional cubic meters of gas are likely to be utilized by various users through the network and the infrastructure that is getting created by the various CGD entities in those 304, 305 GAs that are being done. I mean, all these are, of course, only, this is another part of the same study that they got done, how rapidly the authorizations grew in the last couple of years since 2018. And we've got now 307 authorizations or whatever. the number of CNG stations that have been committed by various entities close to around 25,000 or so. So today there are about 8,000 CNG outlets, if I'm not wrong, 8,000 के करीब हैं. 3 times growth in the CNG stations is what people have committed to set up. All these will be, gas guzzlers, should I say, for people to use going forward. And of course, various other industrial units and commercial establishments. Now, if we go into the PNG sector, which is the crux of the entire CGD sector, the study suggested that there is a potential of, use of gas which will grow by 6 to 9 times, 6x to 9x, should the infrastructure which people have committed is put in place, the customers come on board. Of course, there are challenges which these people will discuss with us, but if they come on board, and for enablers also, I mean, the study said, what are the enablers that are required? So, you need things like focused implementation of the minimum work program. Of course, there are challenges and people will tell us why rollout is not happening in the manner it is supposed to be. But if the rollout is there, MWP is implemented in 8 years, whatever people have committed. If not in 8, 10 or 12 years, it will get implemented. So once that happens, the reach to the end customer happens, and government continues with the existing policy of APM allocation for PNG sector. Today, the APM allocation for PNG sector at least is 100%. Actually, it is 102.5%. So they give you an incentive. Whatever you are selling or whatever you are able to commit to the customers and they use, they give you an additional 2.5% over and above that, in spite of the APM volumes going down in the country. So that is the kind of commitment. As long as that continues, which I'm sure it will, the rollout of minimum work program, it may happen in 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, but once it happens, the rollout of PNG adoption schemes. So there is a scheme called Ujjwala scheme, as you all know, for proliferation of LPG in semi-urban, rural and all those areas, where government is given a lot of incentives. Similar kind of Prajwala scheme is being talked about, and if not today, tomorrow you will see some version of this Prajwala scheme happening. Once that Prajwala scheme is rolled out by the government or the entities in some manner, the government with the government support, the hand-holding of the new customers who are either reluctant or who have some kind of inhibition as to why should I shift from LPG onto PNG will go away. I'm just giving an out-of-the-hat example. Suppose the government says the first 8,000 rupees that are being sought from the customer, 8,000 रुपये लेते हैं हम आजकल, और 20,000 के करीब खर्चा आता है इनका एक घर में कनेक्शन करने का. Some kind of a incentive scheme, if it comes out through either some structured mechanism of a soft loan being given to the CGD entities, or government coming out with some kind of a subsidy scheme saying, भाई पहले 1 लाख घरों के अंदर 20,000 रुपये जो है आपको बैंक सॉफ्ट लोन के तौर पे देगा, and they connect all those 1 lakh houses. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. People get this thing, first 3 months, no bill, for example, or the bill will be offset and will be, in the next subsequent 24 months will be adjusted and taken care of. Once these kind of schemes come, and which are being talked about and may happen very soon. So this is another enabling thing, and a mandate that new buildings or new structures which are constructed in various GAs will mandatorily have like a pipe water connection or an electricity connection, a gas connection inbuilt in the construction design itself, to be built by the contractor under the supervision of maybe the CGD companies or some standards which are set by the industry or the government. Once, and of course, there's another enabler which is, there are lots of issues relating to getting the ROU permissions and time taken and all that. So these are the 5 enablers, and lot of the policy makers and others are working on these. If this happens, the PNG rollout will be 9x of what the use today is, and it will go up to 16 million in this sector alone. So that is the kind of potential at the normal pace. Now, if some added incentives come up and some other thing come up, then this sector alone, PNG, across India, will use about 24 million cubic meters of gas, which is roughly 6-7 million tons of LNG. Imagine the kind of potential for the LNG to be used, because APM gas, as we are told, may not grow. So ultimately, all this is going to come out of LNG, which is sourced into India attractively. So this is for the PNG sector. Now, if you go into CNG, massive potential, likely to grow by at least 4 times of the current usage at the usual pace of growth if it happens. The study says the CNG alone, forget whatever else is coming as competition, the EVs and hydrogen, this, that. In spite of that, if it grows at the normal pace, you will use around 60 million cubic meters of gas for CNG alone, which means about 15 million tons of LNG going forward. Now, if there are incentives, for example, gas comes into GST, lo and behold, you will see, a lot of spurt in the use of CNG happening. Or for that matter, reduction in some taxes, which happens. Or for that matter, CNG vehicles, suddenly that 28% tax on new CNG vehicles comes down to maybe 5 or 8%. You will see the spurt in the use of CNG going forward, and about 80 million cubic meters of gas, which is roughly, 20 million tons of LNG or 25 million tons of LNG, is only going into this sector. Forget what other alternate uses or alternate fuels, they will all find a space, because India is growing at 7-8% GDP. All these fuels will be utilized. It is not as if EVs come, CNG will go away. DTC may be saying कि यहाँ से हटाओ अपने CNG station, but that will not deter, for others to use. And at the end of the day, even DTC is buying those EV buses because there is a government subsidy of 2 crores on that every bus. Once that subsidy goes away, there is no incentive for anybody else to buy a electric vehicle as opposed to a CNG vehicle. So, point is, there is huge potential in this sector. Similarly, for the commercial, they did an exercise. These are detailed studies. I mean, there are, I have not gone into the, details of how, but this is the crux of whatever was the outcome of this study. It says the commercial sector use of gas will grow by 3.8 to 7.3%, 3.8 to 7.3 times once the MWP and other things roll out. And what are the enablers? Adoption of campaigns, multifaceted campaigns across the board by various entities or stakeholders. Application of cogeneration, trigeneration, which nobody has tried today. And several other things, leveraging technology, AI and all those things. काफ़ी डिटेल में ये है, हम उसमें नहीं जाएंगे. But potential is, say, 5 million cubic meters kind of a thing. अब इंडस्ट्रियल में आ जाइए. इंडस्ट्रियल में, of course, there are lots of other competitors also. But what are the enablers that are being talked about? If you actually ban those polluting fuels through legislation or policy, which today are being used, we all know. If there is a mandatory compulsion to use gas or a better fuel, hydrogen, whatever, then suddenly that demand will grow. If there are flexible contracts available, the industry, we talked about, how rigid LNG contracts were in the past, how, today there are relatively flexible contracts coming up. Tomorrow, if somebody of these CGD companies are able to give a contract to for example, an industry saying, एक दिन पहले मेरे को बता दो कितनी LNG या कितनी गैस चाहिए तो मैं अगले दिन मैं उतनी दूंगा. I will, suppose you end up with a take or pay, I give you a flexibility of rolling it over and using that much gas in next 2, 3, 4 months. I mean, something like that. Those kind of flexible contracts, if they are there, or if you are able to say, okay, आज तुम गैस नहीं use कर सकते, alternate cheaper fuel जो तुम use करना चाह रहे हो, I'm willing to supply to you as a fuel aggregator. Same company, same IGL or MGL or somebody else says, आज ये fuel नहीं, वो use कर लो, कल मैं ये दे दूँगा आपको. And then, of course, infrastructure and all that thing. So there are lots of things. Of course, GST is one of those enablers. So if that happens, the industrial use through CGD entities can grow from 2.5 to 6 times. Roughly 10 or 12 million tons of LNG can go into this sector going forward. So these are some of the things I thought. I'll stop here and then